I'm Itamar. I'm the co-founder at Peak. And actually, I won't talk too much about Peak. I actually won't talk too much about how to build a business in EdTech. I will try to insert a few tips on the way. I'll talk more about what we can learn from brains. I thought that could be entertaining. But to give you some context, let's watch a few seconds clip on Peak so you get a bit what we are doing. And if you want to know more, you download Peak and you experience it. So we started very simply. We built games. We like games. We built games with one characteristic is we had a game designer and a neuroscientist sitting next to each other. And we started an interesting business. We are now 25 people in London. We have more than 1 million training sessions a day. It's a free app. You download it, you enjoy it, and it's supported also by a premium subscription that is optional. And we work with great scientists from UCL, Yale, King's, and Cambridge. So we started like that. We took some great games. We thought games could really help you improve. Peak is really a mobile self-improvement company. So we had our, sorry, can I go back? I will skip that. So we had a few million users, and we started looking at that data. And that's really the topic of today, is why data from the brain can be so important. Why are we moving to a world where the brain is connected and we learn from the brain the same way that we learn a lot now from the body? And what's the value there? So let's start with that. When we do an analysis, we ask ourselves some questions, and then the data science team starts looking into it and see if they can validate or not the hypothesis. So let me tell you a bit about myself. I'm an engineer. I studied in Belgium, and when I tell that to people, the first stereotype that comes to mind is Belgian engineers, they drink beers all day. And they are right, but we have a very good reason, and that's the theory of the buffalo herd. So I asked my scientists to look into that. The theory is that the brain works like a herd of buffalo. So the herd can only move as fast as the slowest buffalo. That makes sense, I think. So the brain would be the same and could only process information as fast as the weakest brain cell. Then you drink alcohol. Alcohol kills the weakest brain cell. Therefore, the overall brain goes faster. This is wrong on so many levels, but we still try to make it work. So we're based in London. Drinking alcohol means going to the pub. Going to the pub is a social experience. You talk to people, you have social interactions. So we look into social interactions. So let's take a typical week. Let's take last week, because this week you probably met already 1,000 people. So last week, who of you met, let's say, and interacted with 10 people? If you can raise your hand. OK, 10. Who did more than 50 people in a week? More than 100? You were at Web Summit, probably. So we looked into that, and actually we see a correlation between the brain score that we calculate in Peak and the number of social interactions in a given week. And it means correlation. It doesn't mean causality, but actually this is in line with a lot of research that shows value of social interaction for cognitive health. That's also why it's important for elderly people to keep a very active social life. That's why a lot of elderly people would play bridge. It's not about the bridge, it's really about the social interaction. So that was interesting. Then we thought about the online world, because we are in a digital event today. And a few years ago, I remember we had a doctor from Oxford, Baroness Susan Greenfield, that claimed that social websites are a risk factor for autistic spectrum disorder. That made a lot of noise. Actually, most scientists have invalidated these claims. There is very little foundation to these claims. But we were very interested to look into that and to look at social interaction online. So if you think about time spent on social networks, interacting with people, not watching videos of cats, or time spent on messaging app. So who of you spend an hour a week on this kind of apps? Yeah, I would think everyone. If you're just not listening, if you're not raising your hand, 3 hours? 50 hours? Let's go crazy. Few of you. That's too much. So we look at that, and we actually also see correlation there. It's not as strong, but there seems to be an optimal time, a number of hours of social interaction that correlates with strong and strong cognitive skills. So again, these are just initial findings. There's much more to explore there, but it's very interesting for us to see at how your interaction with games can teach us more about your brain and about people's brains in general. So let's jump topic completely. Let's talk about sport. We just finished the Rugby World Cup. Didn't go so well for us in England. But it's an important topic at Peak because last month we announced a partnership with the Northampton Saints, so they are a Premiership rugby team in the UK, and they've started to integrate Peak, so they integrated brain training as part of their training regimen. So not only will they train the physical, they will start to focus also more on what's happening up there. And so we started looking more at data from athletes, professional athletes. And so some interesting analysis. For example, reaction speed. You would expect athletes to have very good reaction speed, and actually we could validate that through our data. So the data is much more concentrated toward very fast reaction time, which is quite intuitive when you think about it for athletes. But then we look at other elements, what we would call grit or perseverance. So we saw that in cognitive tasks, athletes had more perseverance. What does it mean? It means basically they will train and play more until they reach higher level of performance. They will not satisfy themselves with the lower level of performance. And this compares athletes versus the general population. So these are just examples, snippets of learning that we managed to find out through the Peak data. But more important is what's next. So why starting from brain games, why playing games can actually disrupt so many industries, and why does it matter so much? So think about education. I think that's the core topic of here. We are very interested to see how cognitive training, better understanding of kids or adults, memory capabilities, or attention issues can impact education. Think about students struggling in academia, struggling to memorize content, because unfortunately today, education is often about memorizing content. So you could think a student has a bad memory. Actually, he might have an amazing memory, but his attention would be so low that he could never focus enough to start memorizing this information. And that's why interactive form of education, active learning, becomes so interesting, because it keeps students focused on a task, it keeps them interested. Mental health, of course, huge area for us. One of our games actually was tested by Cambridge University with schizophrenic patients on episodic memory. So one of the memory training was very useful for these patients because episodic memory, so where did I live, which floor of the parking did I leave my car, for example, where are my keys? This is a typical issue of schizophrenic patients. You can think also about aging, of course, as a key area. And last week, the BBC in the UK released the result of a 6-month study. They took 7,000 people aged 50 plus. They went through a training regimen, brain training regimen, 5 times a week, so quite intense. And they saw positive results, but also transfer to everyday tasks. I threw there recruitment. We get contacted every week by a recruiter that wants to use cognitive assessment to assess potential employees. We never did that, but it's a very interesting area. Or could you guide people, students, to their career? Can you help them understand if they have the brain of an engineer or the brain of a designer? Actually, is there such thing as the brain of an engineer? Is there such thing as the brain of an architect? And the last area is sport. For us, that's a very critical area. Any improvement in sport has massive impact on the field. So every little improvement in speed, in attention, in reaction time is something they value very highly. And therefore, it's an area that we have spent much more time looking at. So these are a few areas that highlights why we think the future is for the connected brain. I just use that word for the first time here because I hear everyone talking about connected object. The last 2 years were about the body, Fitbits, Jawbone, everyone tracking the body. But we think that part of the body is probably the most important part. It impacts your happiness, it impacts your health, it impacts your performance at work, it impacts every aspect of your life. So just on our personal agenda, we thought because there is a lot of people here working in academia or in education, we are always interested at looking for partners. So if you have a school, for example, and are interested to see what's the impact of cognitive training in the performance of kids or adults at school, we are very interested to learn more about that. If you're a neuroscientist, also, we want to talk to you. So I hope that was entertaining. Thank you very much. And have a good day at Slush.